good, and guess what? Mommy nature isn't making any more for a very, very long time. The third and final thing you should realize is this. Green energy will not save us at this point. Solar and wind power are still inefficient and cannot be deployed in sufficient quantity to pick up the energy slack in the time allotted by circumstance, which is 7 to 19 years, no more. I'll explain that later. Our limit is about 2030. But 2030 is only 19 years away. It doesn't seem so far when you think about it in those terms. Even in a best-case scenario, children born today will not even be old enough to drink alcohol before the collapse of global human civilization. There is only one technology which could, if it were ready, feasibly pick up all of the energy slack in the time we have left, and that is nuclear fusion, which is not to be confused with nuclear fission reactors of today like the ones in Japan. Fusion is a true clean energy solution with zero waste. Instead of bringing highly radioactive uranium rods into close proximity and then allowing them to boil off water and produce steam, fusion would produce a sustainable reaction like that found in the mantle of a star, feeding it hydrogen produced by electrolysis, which would then produce energy and helium, and no nasty byproducts. If something goes wrong, the reaction would simply cease. It would not catastrophically explode or spew radiation. But even if the entire world pulled together as one today and achieved commercially viable fusion reactors by 2015 through a Herculean effort equivalent to 100 Manhattan projects, which we know is not going to happen, there is still no guarantee that they could be built fast enough to fill in the electricity void which would be left when the fossil fuels disappear. And even if they could and were, electricity alone cannot replace our oil-based lives. In order to completely avoid this collapse, we would have to not only commercialize fusion, but also simultaneously make a complete transition to biological plastics, natural fertilizers, and all the rest. It's not going to happen. Even if we fixed our source of energy and locomotion, most of the products we have today would still become impossible to produce. Fertilizer production and food transportation would still come to a halt. Wars would still erupt over oil, food, and clean water, and society would still collapse. So when will the collapse actually take place? And what can be done to prepare for it? It all boils down to gas prices. The question really is, at what point, for the average person, will it become unsustainable? At what gas price does food become so expensive due to transportation and agriculture costs, and gasoline and energy bills so high that your average American simply cannot do it anymore and has to start deciding between putting gas in the car, food on the table, and paying their bills? What is that number? The best we can tell is that it's about $7 per gallon. It could be as low as $6.25 or as high as $8.50, but it's somewhere in that range. And those numbers are in $2011 and will obviously have to be adjusted for inflation over the next few years. Whatever the actual number ends up being, there will be a point, just prior to actually hitting it, that the pressure from the people of the country to get more oil will shatter the moral pretense of our country, and we will begin to systematically invade any nation, friend or foe, which still has viable fossil fuel reserves, thus igniting the final conflict. That seems to be the most likely scenario, but the real point is this. One way or another, we're going to run out of natural resources, and it's going to happen while everything in our society still depends on them, and it's going to happen soon. Conflict, or simple but complete economic collapse, will happen well before the resources are actually gone. But the point is, we have accelerating consumption versus a finite resource, just like the bacteria analogy in the other video. In real life, our doubling time is 10 years or thereabouts, but not 1 minute. But the time is now exactly 11:59. The jar is half full. We now have as many resources left to use as we have currently used in all of human history. We are one doubling period, as I said, about 10 years away from our jar being full, maybe less. If that doesn't scare the crap out of you, well, you're a stronger person than I am. If we've already hit the peak, as at least one study by the German military suggests, then we predict the beginning of the total collapse of human civilization at some time between 2018 and 2023. If it turns out that the peak does not occur until 2015, as suggested by other studies, also linked to in my description, then we likely have till around 2030. But Nicodemus, that guy in the video said we had till like 2050 or 2060 before the oil runs out. Now listen closely. That number describes how long it would take to use every last drop of recoverable oil on the planet. If you're going to survive and thrive, you need to use not only your brain, but also your common sense and intuition. I guarantee you this one thing. The final conflict over fossil fuel reserves and the collapse of society will occur long before the last drop is used. So that's the problem in a nutshell. At this point, you're either convinced and ready to consider your options, not convinced and feel that you need to do some research of your own, or you think I'm completely crazy and misinformed and that's the end of it. If you think I'm crazy, fine. Bye. Whatever. Get out. More power to you, and I sincerely hope you're right. Before I came to the conclusions outlined in this video, I considered myself an ardent singularitarian, planning for the imminent arrival of Ray Kurzweil's singularity, which is the immortal technological convergence of man and machine, which he expects to take place in the middle of this century. It's a profoundly attractive and optimistic view of the future, and one that I wish could become a reality. Unfortunately, at this point, I see no possible way for humanity to reach that goal. It would happen if we could get that far, but it's a race between the singularity and the collapse, and unfortunately, the singularity simply can't win. Not in this go-around, anyway. Perhaps in another 200 years or so, when we've sufficiently recovered from this looming disaster and have learned to produce our food and machines in renewable harmony with nature. I love technology and think that the singularity is an eventual inevitability. I simply do not believe anymore that it is personally attainable for anyone alive today. If you need to do more of your own research and number crunching, then fine. Take whatever time you need. We, our group, will likely still be in the planning and preparation stage when your research is complete, and you're welcome to contact us at that time. Now, for those of you who are already aware of all or most of the information in this video or were convinced by my diatribe, here's the plan. Do nothing immediately. Bide your time and conserve your resources. We have some resources of our own, and we'll do all the necessary prep work. We're already in the process of collating and organizing a repository of all useful human knowledge, both in digital and hard copy. We will obtain the land, initial heavy equipment, guns and ammunition. We're peaceful, but we're not stupid, you understand. Seeds and plants of all varieties, and we'll begin construction on the basic infrastructure required for the quick post-collapse establishment of a completely renewable and defensible atheistic community in a remote area which is unlikely to be targeted or damaged during the global meltdown. Such a community, by its very nature, is small, relatively speaking, at least to begin with. The type of community we want, the type of community that will be able to survive in the post-collapse world, must not be overly large. We're aiming at around 150 people, no more to start out with. Obviously, this number can and will increase after the initial founding of the settlement. If you'd like to be a part of this project and community after the United States is no more, if you believe that you have valuable intelligence, experience, or skills which will be useful in the establishment of such a community when the time comes, you may RSVP by simply sending an empty email, no content, to G.O.N.E 2027, that's G.O.N.E 2027 @gmail.com. The subject or title of the email should be exactly the following: RSVP, all lowercase, nothing else. As I said, the content of the email itself should be blank, zero text. RSVP is the title, nothing in the text field. Shortly after we receive your RSVP email, you will receive a reply containing a link to a form to fill out and instructions for doing so. The form will include some questions to help prove you're a real, intelligent human being, but mostly it will be asking about you. Basic demographic information, resources you can bring to the table, relevant skills you can contribute to the community. We will accept these forms right up until the point of collapse. So basically, in a best case scenario, you have 20 years. We'll evaluate your potential benefit to our society and let you know if you've, quote, made it. As I said, we're looking for a relatively limited number of people. We already have the necessary resources to get the initial prep work going, and we're looking for useful members, truly valuable members. If you don't make the cut, we're sorry, and we highly recommend you form a group of your own. For those who RSVP to become a part of our post-collapse society, you're not going to hear all that much from us on a regular basis until the actual collapse occurs. We'll send out an update email every 2 months or so containing news articles and assessments regarding the current collapse threat. We'll let you know periodically, rarely, on any big progress in our preparations and emergency updates, which affect the overall threat level. Will be sent out as they happen. The important thing is, when the collapse is actually happening, when the power structures are breaking down, at that point you will receive GPS coordinates and a time and date to meet, along with how to identify yourself. Between now and then, you should get a GPS device with good battery life and even spare batteries, and know how to use it, know how to manually enter coordinates to a destination, since that is how you'll be informed of our location. It will be off the beaten path, to say the least, but not so bad that it'll be impossible to get equipment in there. Now, GPS satellites will probably not continue to function for a long period after the beginning of the meltdown. Our timing must be correct. Late enough that we can be quite sure it's happening, but soon enough that you'll have a chance to effectively use the GPS system to get the location information before it shuts down. Once you get the coordinates, we highly recommend marking the spot on a physical map, since GPS will likely stop functioning long before you actually arrive. Thank you for taking the time to listen, watch, and read the information provided. For that alone, I thank you. Good luck to you all, and remember to be vigilant, intelligent. Do not listen to the lies anymore. Use your common sense, and we'll come out of this together.